The Museo ng Kaalamang Katutubo is a foundation undertaking museum development and cultural education. It assays various museological functions, being true to one of the two primary or central notions in our name, kaalaman. MusKKat's collection is a repository of both tangible and intangible heritage, and we explore and share these with everyone curious and interested in cultural objects, in processes of fracture, and accompanying stories and sundry information. One of the ways we share and interact is MusKKat's cultural brunch, entitled Usapin, Usapan, and delivered as a podcast. It is a venue for an informed and informative conversation between MusKKat, represented by yours truly, and one subject matter expert. By the way, my name is Corazon Alvina. Today, we have a conversation with Dr. Cherubim Quizon, anthropologist, associate professor of anthropology at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. She studies how ideas of nation, ethnicity, and the self relate to symbols and their transformation, whether approached as material culture, art, or popular imagery. Her principal research is on the textiles and dress of the Bagobo of Mindanao. Her works have seen print and have been heard in a number of academic engagements in many parts of the world. She teaches anthropology courses, cultural, linguistic, visual, and anthropology of art, as well as anthropological theory and research methods. Hello, Dr. Quizon. Hi, Cherry. How are you? Nice to hear you from New York.
Hi, Cora. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Yes, I'm indeed here. Kamusta naman? How is it in Manila?
Well, house arrest pa rin ng karamihan ng tao, but things move and things get done. And we can't complain. Not too much anyway, but we do. Anyway, you are the expert in Mindanao Highland clothing and cloths or textile. And you once said that some of these have been manufactured for the tourist market. Can you elaborate on that, please?
I guess one of the things that we tend to not think about is when we think of indigenous peoples, right, and the cloth that they make, is somehow that they're kind of cut off, right, from the rest of life. But in reality, they're
Mm-hmm.
not. And a very big part of the way that indigenous peoples access, you might say, the modernity, no, is actually through tourism. And sometimes it's direct, sometimes it's indirect, and it varies for every group, no. And so for cloth, it actually, the cloth that they make, such as a bakaikat, which
Mm-hmm.
is the more traditional one, um, essentially these interactions are embedded in the cloth. So parang as I study the textiles themselves and I study the things that come out of each community, over time you begin to see, na talagang the responses of the women that make them um, are indicated, right, in the cloths that they make. So they make stuff for themselves and they also make stuff for outsiders. Because it's
Okay.
natural, diba? It happens, and so it
Oh, okay.
shouldn't be something that surprises us, no. But it does
Mm-hmm.
give us pause for reflection, no.
Is there anything within the language or within framework of this interaction that you have as a researcher with these weavers who make for both who make for the tourist market? How does that sit with you as a scholar?
I remember when I was at I think it was the ASEAN Textile Conference in 2009, and I was invited to give a plenary talk, and after my talk, someone came up to me. I think it was Maribel Ogpin, and she says to me, "Hindi ka pala purista." And I said, "Yeah, admittedly, I'm not." No, one of the things that I guess I benefited from having left the Philippines, I went away for grad school, matagal na, no, in
Mm-hmm.
91, and I have lived abroad for most of these years. And then I came back very early on in the field work. Now I was a grad student. And then I encountered a Mandaya woman and I wrote about this in an article that came out on a book on cosmopolitanism and tourism. No, one of the women I met, she was a Mandaya woman. Her name was Mapunlay. And I remember June De Leon was even there because it was during this, there was an NCCA thing happening, in
Mhm.
Davao, in Samal Beach Park, actually. But before we crossed over to Samal Beach Park, there was this little shop next to what was then the Insular Hotel, no, in Lanao.
Ah, mhm.
Wala na ngayon dun but that's where it used to be. And so we go into the shop, and it had mostly Mandaya. It was actually run by Mandaya women. And there was a woman there who I came to know as Mapunlay. I met her. I went to her home village later on. No? And she was in full Mandaya gear. No? Kasi the shop was intended for tourists, no? To sell
Yeah.
textiles and to interact with them. And I remember she was explaining to me that she had this lovely cloth, and she said, it was, and she was referring to it and describing it for me,
Mhm.
and she kept on saying purple, and and so she was describing it, but she would say, ako naman, ano yun? So ako naman, sulat ako, purple.
Mm.
Sabi ko, ano yung purple? So, kasi di ba, bago pa ako, I'm so new
Oo.
to the field, no? It's
So
my,
purple as in PARPOL.
and that's what I wrote. Sabi ko, ano yung purple, ano? And then finally, it occurred to me after a while that she was saying purple. She was referring to the
Mm.
color purple, no? So it was the color
Mm.
purple, but she was saying purple. Pero sa tenga ko, akala ko, wow, anong term yun? Ano? So sulat ako ng sulat, ano? And so,
Something technical.
something technical. And then, and this kept on happening during the field. I mean, I remember, I wrote about this even much earlier when I was among the Tagabaw Bagobo naman. Pagkausap nila ako, when they're speaking to me, they would refer to their clothing as costume.
Ah,
Costume, no?
mm.
And I would hear it as the English word costume, no? Sabi ko, costume lang yun, ano? Kasi but they would say costume. But later on, as my Tagabawa Bagobo improved, no?
Mm.
And also, I would hear them talk to each other. Pagkang kausap nila, Tagabawa Bagobo, they don't say costume, no? They say umpak, no? Which is the clothing, no?
Yeah.
So, but they would say costume to me kasi I'm an outsider, no? And I had at my first visit, kasi wala pa akong budget noon, it was
Mm-mm.
a friend of my friend who volunteered to be with me, to be my research assistant. Her name was a lovely woman, Giselle Barreto. She's a
Mm.
Visayan. She speaks beautiful Visayan. No? She's from Bukidnon. But when they were speaking to Giselle, they would say Sinina, which would be
Which
Cebuano, no?
is
Which
okay.
refers to the top. So I was again. This doesn't really sink in. I don't realize this until later. No, that because Taga-Bagobo and most of the indigenous peoples are multilingual, as most
Oh,
Filipinos are. No,
yes, yes.
yeah, we don't think about it, but in
No.
reality, our multilinguality makes us reach out to others. I like to think, no, as
Hmm.
a way of connecting.
Yes.
So it's a kind of sociality, no? We're kind. We want to connect. So pag ang kausap ako, and
Mm-mm.
so they would speak Tagalog or English, no? Costume, no? And then over time, when they figured out that at least I can pick up some Tagabaw Bagobo, umpak na, di ba? So parang so we're right. So when we
So,
think about something like tourism, right? When we think about something like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's their entire, di ba, existence. It's like the existence of indigenous
mm,
peoples is like multi-layered, like everybody else, no? At pagkang kausap nila, turista, di
yeah.
ba? Purple.
Oo. Pero, pero parang, I don't know, it's a form of acceptance, and they let you inside when they start speaking to you the way they speak to those within their community, di ba? Or those who speak their language. So in I would like to take you from Mandaya and uh, from Davao, for instance. I'd like to take you to the Bagobo and the Tiboli when they are in an audience, let's say, or they are interacting with people from Manila, people who are how should we say, who are choreographed. How do they react? For instance, I think there was one time that you said there was a Bayanihan style dancers performing ethnic dances for actual Bagobo and Tiboli in the audience. How
Yes,
how did
yes.
they react?
again, that was in the early part of my fieldwork. So I invite your listeners to actually read this thing I wrote, and it's
Mm.
really about me reflecting on tourism. No, but it was at that same year when there was a government-sponsored seminar
Mhm.
at a beach park in Davao. And the owner of the beach park, because if you live in Davao City, and this is one of the beauties of living in Davao City, one of the easiest ways to get to the beach is to take a little taxi, boat taxi, to cross over to Samal Island. And so
Oh,
locals
okay.
do this all the time. And across in Samal Island, there are all these little family-owned beach parks, no?
Mm.
And the beach parks, you can stay the night or you can spend the day. You go and swim and you eat
Mm.
and hang out, ganyan. And it's very, very much local tourism. But they also have international tourism, no, on the other side, which is Pearl Farm and all that other ones. Anyway, so we were in one of these family beach parks, and I think the owner was a former member of Bayanihan. So one of the ways that
Mhm.
she treats guests like us was to actually have a bayanihan style performance, no. And so I remember
Okay.
very well that when this was happening, the audience was made up of people from Manila, but lots of OSCC with at that time the precursor of the NCIP, no, the Office of
Mm-mm.
Southern Culture
Mhm.
Community. Lots of employees from that one, some people from NGOs. But I also understood that many of the OSCC employees were themselves indigenous. No? So halo-halo yan. So may Manobo, may Tiboli, may Bagobo, right? Different ones in the audience. No? So when after dinner and they were going to have this performance, I kind of froze because I was thinking, oh no, mag-perform sila, no? I was thinking in my head, I hope they don't perform, bagobo style or
Oh.
whatever, no, the indigenous dances, because the audience is indigenous. So I was thinking in my head, oh no, what's going to happen? But indeed they did, no? So nung lumabas na yung fire, alam ko na, sabi ko, okay, here goes, no? And so, and the dancers were very young, teenage, very, very good. They were very, very good in
Mm.
the Bayanihan genre. Good and very enthusiastic. No? So they performed, and the Bayanihan style is very different. No, it's intended for an audience in a proscenium stage. Diba? It's a
Yes.
stylized
Yes.
performance, right?
It's
Mm-hmm.
staged in every sense of the word
Yes, and
staged.
it and
That's
it
what
and
it
it
is.
has, and I believe it has its purpose. No, I'm not going to sit here
Mm.
and say, bayanihan is wrong. No, I think that it
Mm.
has its purpose. Its purpose is to, right, to project, right, a certain modernity that's
Mm.
based on indigenous tradition. So it's an interpretation. No? And so,
Yes.
and it because of that, it has its supporters, of course, because it's something that you would find in a formal stage, and it's intended for a certain type of interaction. No, it's almost like watching modern dance. No, it's like watching ballet, ganyan. So I understand
Mm-mm.
it. No, but then I was kind of worried because this was going to be an audience made up of them.
Yeah.
So I sat there, and the performance happened, beginning, middle, and end. No, and very ballet. The movements are very, very different. No, it's an outward kind of movement. No,
Mhm. Mm-mm.
projecting to the audience. They spot, di ba, yung the ballet dance, they
Yes.
spot.
Very. Yeah.
Mm-mm. And so when it ended, usually this is the type of performance that will elicit thunderous applause, because it always kind of gets to this dramatic ending. No?
Mm-hmm.
The applause was polite, but so medyo I think
Mm.
the young people were kind of wondering, bakit it wasn't as enthusiastic as it was. Anyway, so it ended. And so, then the dinner was over. The Manila people were going back to their rooms, but I was kind of, I hung around because I wanted to know what was going to happen um, with the indigenous peoples who were in the audience. At this time, this is early in my fieldwork. I didn't know them
Oh.
yet. Later on, I knew them, but I kind of met
Mm-hmm.
some of them at this time. So nung wala ng tao, one and some of the gongs used in the performance were still on the stage. No, somebody got up, and this man was, later on, I knew him to be Datu Udang, no, Oscar Udang.
Mm.
Datu Udang got up. He went to the stage, and then he said, "Tayo naman." Okay, so I was
Mm.
thinking, what does that mean? Does it mean they're going to perform
Mm.
bayanihan style. No, I don't know what that meant, no? But he
Mhm.
got up and he started playing on the gongs. No? And then suddenly from the audience, there were these whoops. Whoa! Ganyan sila. Tapos biglang, next thing I know, right, another man and someone who I came to know later on as Molino Ogit, who was very important, right, to my research. He introduced me to Salintamonon, essentially. Um,
Mm.
so he stood up, and then there was another woman. I will refer to her as I refer to her as Helen in my article. It's not her real name, no, but she was
Mm.
a Manobo woman. So sayaw sila sabi nila, oh, courtship dance to, courtship dance, sabi nila. So they were
Oh.
dancing, and Dato Udang was playing. And so, but then she was saying, I cannot dance kasi what she was only wearing, street clothes. So
Yeah.
somebody else, Tiboli, si Maria, was there.
Mhm.
I came to know her later on as Maria. Pinahiram niya yung malong niya. So,
Ah.
nagsuot ng malong si Helen. Sayaw sila, no? So parang, but then the dances was completely different, as you can imagine, no? Hindi siya yung bayanihan style, it's the inward
Mm.
looking towards the earth, di ba? Na walang
Yes.
beginning, middle, and
Mm-mm.
end,
Mm-mm.
ganyan. So,
Yeah.
and the audience was going, whoa, whoa, diba? Syempre, tsaka naglalandian kasi courtship dance, di ba? So, naglalandian sila.
Oh.
So it was this really amazing kind of thing happening. No? And they were essentially jamming. Nagja-jamming sila.
Ah, that's ang
Yeah.
ganda naman.
And then
Ah,
nobody was really saying out loud what I think they were thinking, which was, ganito yon.
ito yon.
Ganito yon. No? Hindi yung ganon, no? Ganito yon. No? But at the same time, I realized Filipinos include, especially indigenous peoples, are very kind people. No? So, ayaw nilang hiyain yung mga bata. Kasi, di ba, they were
Mhm.
teenagers who were dancing. No? They didn't want to say anything that would make them feel bad. No? But I
Mm-mm.
also think that, indigenous peoples are also usually expected to not say anything. No? So, may ganong
Mm.
klaseng
Yes,
agreement.
yes, yes, of course.
Yeah. But for me, that was like one of those really strange moments, no,
Mm-mm.
that I still keep on going back to, and I'm so grateful I was able to actually write about it, no, kasi
Yes.
parang you can miss it, so easily. Madali mong hindi mapansin yan, no,
Mm-mm.
parang.
Mm-mm.
But as a Filipino scholar, I feel like we have a very special position, no,
No.
kasi kahit pa paano, even though let's say I am, I'm from Manila, no, my mom's Tagalog, my dad's Kapampangan, no, so really lowland Christian Filipino talaga, no. But because of our upbringing, I think we can pick up these things better than, let's say, somebody who's not from here, no. So parang nandun ako, nakaupo lang, biglang ayan na, parang you suddenly see this unfold. So I think that it's kind of like, I hope, an invitation to your listeners, no, na
Mm.
as Filipinos thinking about our own cultural kind of diversity, no, which is really
Mm-mm.
there, no, our linguistic diversity, we are actually in a lovely position to reflect on our own heritage, no, that our heritage is like this. Hindi mo kailangan hanapin. Andyan na siya. It's right in
Nice.
front of us. No, it
Mhm.
happens. It's unfolding, no? Parang this
Yeah.
is it. And in this case, ang feeling ko, this was just as authentic, quote unquote, no,
Mhm.
as 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 anything, no? Even though nanghiraman lang ng malong, 'di ba? Tapos tiboli yung malong ng isa, tapos yung so it was this one of those kind of, it's almost like, to borrow a term from Levi Strauss. This is bricolage, 'di ba?
Mm.
This is bricolage, and it's bricolage that was done for pleasure, no, for amusement, for which is the reason why you engage in the arts, no.
Yes,
So
of course.
parang, yeah, so for me it was like that was just, and it's also so Pinoy, no, it's so much fun, you know.
Oh, yeah.
we tayo naman, yun ang kanya, no, tayo naman.
Oh, you, oh, that's that is so fantastic. Tayo naman.
Tayo
Anyway, you
naman, oo.
mentioned Salinta mo, no?
Oh yes,
That's
Salinta,
how.
yes.
Yeah. So there is another thing that you wrote about, which is a plant called oli oli that has no
Yes,
economic purpose, but
yes.
the sister of Salinta values it because
Yes,
What?
yes. Another a public it's coming out. It's a publication that I wrote with Fe Magpayo Bagaho, who is a retired biologist from Ateneo de Davao, who was so fabulous. She was so helpful for all my plant IDs. No, so when I had to leave the field because I had a family and I had a child who I parked with my mother-in-law in Greece. So my time in the field had to end. No, but Salinta's dying schedule was going at its own pace. So I asked my research assistant, si Doricel Nakano, who later on married the late Miguelito Bancas, no? She was
Oh,
she was going to be she was going to be the one who will document Salinta's dying, the dying of Abaca, using Morinda, which is the red. Kasi hiwala yung
mm,
dying ng pula sa itim, ano? So it was
mm,
gonna be red.
mm,
So, whenever Salinta told her to come, she came. Lito came. Lito is Jangan. He's not Tagabawa, but
oh,
Doricel is Tagabawa. Lito took photos. Doricel took notes, and she knew because she was working with me, so she knows what we needed. And Fe Magpayo was the one that also trained her how to collect the specimens and bring it to her. At any rate, during this process, no, Doricel told me that after the very long process of dyeing the thread red using
mm,
morinda or sikaring, nakasabit yung mga abakan na dye na, no? Yung the thread pa lang
okay.
siya, hindi pa siya nawiweave, no?
Oo.
And as they were air drying in the shade, si Indo, yung kapatid ni Salinta, put in these little sprigs of grass in the
Ah,
morinda, no? Parang it's all over, no? Parang siniksikan lang niya ng mga sprigs of grass. Ang pangalan ng sprigs of grass, Oli Oli. And Mike Price, who is a botanist who lives in Ann
yes.
Arbor, where I used to live, and you must know Mike Price, no? Who's
Yes,
another
I
one.
do. I do.
These are my angels, no? So si Fe, tsaka
Yeah.
si Mike Price. So Mike Price identified it for me, right, as a sedge, no? But it's
Ah,
called Oli Oli, no? And so she would insert that. And so she explained out to Doricel, sabi niya, nilalagay natin ito kasi Doricel is Tagabaw. Even though she's not from Bansalan, she was considered as like their adopted daughter. They loved her.
mm,
And what's not to love? She's lovely. Anyway, so sabi nila kay Sel, we put this here kasi Oli Oli refers to parang to not to remember, right? It refers to
mm.
memory, no?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's put in the dyed hanks of abaca as an expression of their desire for the abaca to not return to its
Mm,
original color.
I
So
see.
parang yeah, so it's parang it's telling the abaca, no? Wag kang bumalik doon sa dati ha. Pula ka na lang. Which was such a lovely little thing. So this plant, no, it has no economic purpose, but it is part of right I would say it's part of the ethnobotanical, no,
Mm-hmm,
of
mm-hmm.
ethnobotanical repertoire, no, kasi it's placed there as a. I guess you could. I try to resist, saying things like ritual, no, kasi when
Oo.
we start saying ritual, then we start going off in weird places.
Mm,
But I guess you would say that it is a kind of a ritual expression, no?
I
Um,
suppose.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's kind of
Mm,
asking the thread, no?
mm-hmm.
Huwag kang bumalik, ha? Pula ka na.
Oo. Hanggang diyan ka na lang.
Oo, hindi kasi
Anyway,
ang hirap ng pula eh. So you really
oo nga.
you want it to really stay that
Preserve,
way.
yeah, stay that
Mm,
way. Yes.
yep.
Anyway, maybe our listeners would like to know who Salinta Monon is. And Salinta, the late Salinta, was a Gamaba laureate. The Gamaba is the Gawad Manlilikha ng Bayan, which is a ranking system for traditional artists. They are at the same level as the national artist ranking given to painters, architects, uh, film directors. And so Salinta was a treasured weaver. So can we jump to another Gamaba laureate, Lang Dulay? Because I also heard a little bit of a story when you went to see her that there was some sort of translation of an utterance by her, and it it revealed a larger question about love, interpreting one's heritage, and the choices that scholars such as you and I make in our life work. What was this?
So I got to meet Salinta actually through, I mean, I got to meet Lang Dulay, who, as you mentioned, is a Gamaba awardee, through Salinta. No? I knew
Mm-hmm.
Salinta before she was an awardee. But then because they became awardees in, I believe, 1998, ba yun? I think,
Mm-hmm.
no? Um, then they were added, they were not incorporated, they were invited to participate by, by Marianne and Lynette Mirano at the Smithsonian,
Yes.
yeah, in Smithsonian Folklife Festival in Washington, D.C. But when they were being
Mm.
invited, they weren't sure what the heck was going on. So I remember getting a phone call one day when I was already in the U.S. in Ann Arbor at that time, because that's where my husband had his postdoc. And so it was Lito Bangkais, no? He called me and said, tinatanong daw
Mm-hmm.
nila sa Rinta kung sino tong si Rick Tremillo. Sabi ko, bakit? Kasi daw tiniimbita kami sa iniimbita kami sa Washington, D.C. Sabi ko, anong meron? Sabi, yun daw, Smithsonian
Ye-
Festival. Sabi ko, sabi ko, ethnomusicologist yan ka. so so that was kind of, they weren't sure what that was, no, but then so they came, so I actually visited them in DC. That's where I
mm.
met Salinta for the first time in Washington, DC, right, with Maria Tode, who was also
Oh,
there, Maria
yes.
Wana, no.
Maria Wanang.
Yes, and so, and I with Pata Fablis help, we figured out a way to have them visit the Smithsonian collection, also they could look at the textiles there. So that's how I met Lang Dulay.
Mm.
But that was the only time I really met her. But then when I became part of the Fowler Museum Weaver Stories project, so I proposed to Roy, because I get to choose
Okay.
who I would feature in the film. I
Mm-hmm.
said to Roy, I want to do it on Salinta and Lang, both of them, no? And about their textiles. Sabi niya, sure, that's fine. But then Salinta died. So that year, I came to the Philippines in 2009. Salinta died that summer. No? And so I only could visit Lang. No? I could only incorporate her in the film. I managed to include Salinta a little bit in the film, but it was really on Lang. So this is part of the Fowler Museum's Weaver Stories project. It's a really fabulous series of videos, as well as newly commissioned works, no, by weavers all over Southeast Asia. And the Philippine
Mm-hmm.
component was Salinta and Langdulay. So anyway, in the process of doing the video on Langdulay, so I went to Lang, and my emphasis, my expertise is not Tiboli. My expertise is really Bagobo.
Uh-huh.
And if you decide to learn a language, no, kailangan pumili ka, no? So, in fact, when I decided
Oh.
to learn Tagabawa Bagobo, it meant that I had to focus on Tagabawa Bagobo. But there are two other languages that the Bagobo speak, which is Jangan
Mm.
and Obo, no? So, even that's a problem. Ang alam ko lang Tagabawa. Anyway, so I don't speak Tiboli. Hindi ako marunong magtiboli. I understand
Mm.
certain very basic greetings and certain terms related textiles, but I don't understand it, right? Or speak it. So sabi ko, I needed some interpreters. And so for the project
Mm.
itself, because it's a film, it's a video project, I had an on-site
Yes.
interpreter, which was Maria.
Uh-huh.
Back then, she was Maria Juana. No? I call
Mm-hmm.
her Maria Tode because that was her maiden name. She's been married since. And then I had somebody who would work with me post-production, which is Beth Malinog, who's
Mm-hmm.
also from Hilobong Performance Troupe, no? A friend of Maria's. And so these were like my two translators. I had an on-site one in Lake Cebu, and I had somebody who would work with me post-production because Beth was in Manila and she lived close to my sister's house in Makati. Okay, she worked close to my sister's house. So anyway, so that was the plan. And so we went to the field and I had cameramen that was recommended to me, right, by folks from the NCCA actually, right? Mga freelancer, no? So we went
Uh-uh.
there. And the interesting thing was, as we were doing the interview with Lang, at some point, her grandson, si John, um,
Mm-hmm.
was slowly, parang was becoming clear that Lang was more comfortable with John, no, as an interpreter. So
Okay.
magaling naman tayong makiramdam, no? So Maria,
Makiramdam.
without me telling Maria anything, alam na ni Maria. So she kind of pulled back, no?
Mm-hmm.
And then si John na ang nag-take over ng translation duty. So there was one part where I was, we would, the usual set of conversations, no, and then she was sitting down and all that, and there was a question that we asked her that John translated for us, and then later on, sabi ko, okay, fine, we're gonna use John's translation, and I think I even found it somewhere. So it was something like, we were asking her how the award changed her life.
Mm-hmm.
So we used John's translation, and then later on, post production, I put in the subtitles based on what John had said. Then I was at Starbucks in Makati, with Beth, because she's working. We all have to make a living, so it was after work, and we were having, yeah, I was treating her to kape, and she was looking at the rough footage on my laptop.
Mm-mm.
Maingi pa nga Starbucks. Tapos so she was listening to what it said. She goes, teka, Tanya, balikan mo. Sabi niya ganon. May sinabi siya, sabi niya ganon sa akin. May sinabi siya. So sabi ko, ano sinabi niya? May sinabi siya, sabi niya na hindi daw na-catch nung subtitles. So she went back, and then she said, ay, tumindig ang balahibo ko. Sabi niya, bakit? Sabi ko, ano sinabi niya? Sinabi niya, something daw about kalabaw. About Clubo.
Oh.
Sabi ko, ano? But wala namang kalabaw doon sa translation ni Jan, no? So so I'll read to you if I may know what the original was. So translation ni Jan, when we ask her, anong what did you how did the award affect your life? She, according to Jan, sabi niya, I am thankful for the big changes in my life when compared to the time before. First of all, the National Traditional Artist Award allowed me to send my grandchildren to school. I am happy because my grandchildren completed their education through the assistance of the government in naming me a national artist. So yun ang initial translation, ano.
Okay.
Tapos sabi ni Beth, hindi ganon. Sabi niya, it's not exactly wrong, but ito yan. So ito yung ginawa namin based on what Beth said. She said, my life before the award was very different. Now I'm deeply relieved because I'm able to fulfill my wish to see my grandchildren finish school and become teachers. It is my dream, my wish. I am blessed. I remember when I visited America, I realized how important knowledge was. I told myself that if anybody would sell knowledge, I would buy it no matter how many water buffalo it would cost. I realized the value and importance of education. I won't waste my money but use it to send my grandchildren to school. Kalabaw, no? So, klubo in Tibolo, klubo.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So the measure of value, no, which is really significant, no. So the klubo is I did the pricing at that time. At that time, it was like $450, no, for one for one bride wealth ready kalabaw, no? Which is like 1/10, I think, of the average annual salary in the province, no. So it's a very significant wealth item, no. And so for me, that was really a telling moment, no? Kasi hindi naman mali yung translation of John. It was actually not incorrect. But then I was reflecting on, why was there no mention, right, of the Carabao? And I'm thinking that in a way, perhaps John was protecting his grandmother, no? Because there's a lot of lowland contempt, right, for highland ways. There's a lot of lowland. There's a tendency, on one hand, we like to romanticize them, right?
Yes.
The notion of the savage, right? The noble savage. But on the other hand, in the same breath, right, we will make fun of them and say, ay nako, di ba? Parang mga backward, mga primitive, ganyan, di ba? So I surmise, no, that partly because, of course, John couldn't go back and look at the rushes, no, but partly I think because it was a protective gesture, no. It was love. He loved his grandmother and he didn't want her, right, to be made fun of, no? On the other hand, Beth also understood, right, that the power, no, of the image of the Kalabaw, and why it was important to assert that as well. So it was one of these, like, almost in my view, there were like three voices, no. There was Langdulay speaking, no, and then there was her grandson interpreting for her, and then there's Beth also interpreting, no, for me in the project, which again is like a very important kind of insight, I feel, no? Especially in our dealings with indigenous people, that they are essentially, they should be a conversation of equals, no? Parang John is entitled to this translation, so is Beth, no?
Yeah, yeah.
And here I am, I just reflect on it and I present it for us to think about, no? So yeah.
And that is one of the purposes actually of our Museum of MusKKat. We started out saying that we will try to change the point of view of, how did you call them, the lowlanders, the
Mm-hmm.
questions about the people from the itaas, so that they are in step, and they're not looked down upon. That is the big objective of the Museo ng Kaalamang Katutubo, actually, to be able to celebrate them and to show that this is a shared contemporary presence that we have, and we should share it equally and equitably. I know that that is quite an ambition, and we work towards that anyway.
Yes,
But
and I believe it's a lovely goal, and I think, the more we think about this, the more we kind of, I guess, celebrate, right, this without, without the, I guess I guess we can't help but be affected by previous formulations, right? So
no.
noble savage formulations,
Mm,
right?
mm,
I on one hand, it's not great because it conceals historical processes, right?
mm,
But on the other hand, the noble savage kind of i- image is at least a benevolent one. Well, benevolent might not be a great word, but
no.
at least it's an open attitude,
Mm,
right? There's a certain
mm,
openness to it. Yun lang
mhm.
nga, it's an openness on our own terms, no? Parang tipong, pag naka-cellphone ka na, hindi ka na authentic. Di ba? May mga
Mm.
ganyan, ano?
No.
Di ba? On the other hand, hopefully, MusKKat has been able to at least take care of the other side, which is naman, the more denigrating one, no?
Mhm.
That kind of is ashamed, no, of
Oh,
this notion of being quote unquote primitive, quote unquote backwards, which is actually, of course, not true, no? But you know
oh.
what I mean? So parang may parang maraming mga tropes. There's so many tropes that are embedded when dealing with indigenous peoples, no?
Yeah.
But for me, it's I feel very fortunate, no, that I've been able to have these types of conversations and interactions with them, especially the young people. No? The young people are so important. The young indigenous people, because they're really not in agreement, which they shouldn't be. They are, they are debating, no, their future,
Mm.
their heritage, which I think is something that we need to also embrace, no.
Yes, of course, of course. But at this point, I would like to thank you, Cherry, Dr. Quizon, for this wonderful, exciting, exhilarating conversation. I think it has brought a lot of things to light, and hopefully, our listeners will be stimulated to think, to meditate about what you have brought forth. Thank you very much, and we hope this is not the last time that you will speak with us. I hope this
Oh,
is the
and
first of
anytime,
many.
Cora. Thank you. It was a
Okay.
pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to talk about these things. And yeah, good luck to you and more power to your museum
Thank
and
you,
your
thank you,
programming.
Sherry. Thank
Okay.
you, thank you.